The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had every day for the past 7 years, casting golden light across endless fields of wheat and medicinal plants. The colony stretched for miles under the pale blue sky, with neat rows of crops and small houses dotting the landscape. 3,000 people called this place home, and 800 of them were children who had never known any other world. Danny Peterson kicked a stone down the dirt path as he walked to school, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. At 12 years old, he was one of the older kids in the colony, and he took that responsibility seriously. His little sister Amy walked beside him, chattering about the butterfly she had caught yesterday and then released because their mother taught them to be kind to all living things. "Do you think we will ever see Earth?" Amy asked, looking up at her brother with curious brown eyes. Danny shrugged and adjusted his backpack. "Maybe someday, but this is our home. Mom and Dad came here to build something good, and we are part of it." The school building came into view, a simple white structure surrounded by playground equipment that the parents had built with their own hands. Children ran and played in the morning sunshine, their laughter carrying across the fields. Katie Walsh sat on a swing, holding her favorite stuffed bear and watching the other kids play tag. She was shy and quiet, but everyone in the colony knew her sweet smile. Teacher Sam Murphy stood by the school door, greeting each child as they arrived. He had come to New Haven 5 years ago, leaving behind a comfortable job on Mars to help build something better. Every morning he felt grateful for the chance to teach these children, to watch them grow up in a place where they could run free and dream big. "Good morning, Danny." "Good morning, Amy," he said with a warm smile. "Are you ready for today's lesson about the different alien species in the galaxy?" Inside the school, children filled the classrooms with excited chatter. They learned about their own world and the galaxy beyond, about the peaceful trade relationships humans had built with dozens of alien species. The medicinal plants grown on New Haven helped cure diseases across multiple star systems, and the children took pride in knowing their home contributed to the greater good. Meanwhile, high above the planet, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office aboard the Orbital Defense Station. The station was small compared to military installations in the core worlds, with just enough firepower to deal with pirates or smugglers. Jake had served in the Human Defense Fleet for 15 years before accepting this quiet posting, wanting a peaceful assignment where he could focus on protecting families instead of fighting wars. Through his window, he could see the 6 patrol ships that made up New Haven's entire space defense force. They were older models, reliable but not particularly powerful. The colony had never needed serious military protection because it posed no threat to anyone and provided valuable medical supplies that benefited all species. Down on the planet, Dr. Lisa Yang checked on her latest batch of healing herbs in the research facility greenhouse. The plants glowed softly with bioluminescent properties that made them particularly effective in treating Centauri blood disorders and Rigelian nerve damage. Her work had saved thousands of lives across the galaxy, and she found deep satisfaction in contributing to peaceful cooperation between species. Mayor Helen Cross walked through the town center, stopping to chat with shopkeepers and farmers about their daily concerns. The biggest problems in New Haven were usually things like organizing the Harvest Festival or deciding whether to expand the playground. Crime was almost non-existent, and conflicts were resolved through community meetings where everyone had a voice. The children finished their morning lessons and ran outside for recess, their voices filling the air with joy and excitement. Danny Peterson organized a game of Capture the Flag, while Katie Walsh found a quiet spot to read a book about space exploration. Amy Peterson and her friends picked wildflowers that grew between the crop rows, planning to surprise their parents with bouquets. These were the moments that defined New Haven. Children playing in safety, parents working together for the common good, and a community built on hope for the future. The colonists had left behind the crowded cities and political tensions of the core worlds to create something pure and simple. They grew food and medicine, raised their children with strong values, and contributed to galactic peace through their trade relationships. But far away in the galactic core, in the imposing halls of the Galactic Council chambers, a different conversation was taking place. 12 alien species sat around a circular table, their various forms representing millions of years of separate evolution. The reptilian Vextar, the insectoid Zephyrians, the crystalline Andromedans, and 9 other species had gathered to discuss what they saw as the human problem. Ambassador Zethrak of the Vextar Empire stood before a holographic display showing human expansion across the galaxy. His cold reptilian eyes studied the data with growing concern. Humans had spread to over 200 worlds in just 50 years, building colonies and establishing trade routes at a pace that worried the established powers. "Look at these numbers," Zethrak hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. 50 years ago, humans were confined to their single solar system. Now they have colonies in 17 sectors and growing influence in dozens of star systems. At this rate, they will dominate the entire galaxy within 2 centuries. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Zephyrian delegate's compound eyes glittered as she spoke in her chittering language, translated instantly by the council's universal communicators. The humans reproduce rapidly and adapt quickly to new environments. Their colonies are efficient and their technology advances at an alarming rate. "They are also peaceful," interjected the Centauri representative, his blue skin shimmering with concern. "Human colonies focus on agriculture, medicine, and trade. They have shown no aggressive expansion or territorial conquest behaviors." Ambassador Zethrak's tail lashed with irritation. "Peace can be a strategy, Centauri. They build trust, establish relationships, and grow stronger while we debate their intentions. By the time we recognize the threat, it may be too late to respond effectively." The debate continued for hours, with some species advocating for diplomatic pressure and others pushing for more direct action. Finally, Admiral Kretak of the Zephyrian Hive spoke with the authority of his military position. "We must send a clear message that human expansion cannot continue unchecked. A demonstration of force against a minor colony will show them the consequences of overreach without triggering a full-scale war." As the alien leaders debated humanity's future, the children of New Haven continued their innocent games, unaware that their peaceful existence had become a political problem for a species they had never met. The golden afternoon sun cast long shadows across their playground, and their laughter echoed across fields of healing plants that had brought hope to countless worlds. The vote was close, but the decision was made. New Haven, chosen for its isolation and apparent defenselessness, would serve as the example to teach humanity its proper place in the galactic order. The alarm bells started ringing at exactly 800 hours on what had begun as another peaceful morning on New Haven. Captain Jake Morrison bolted upright, in his chair aboard the orbital defense station, his coffee spilling across the control panel as emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. His sensor operator, Lieutenant Gary Foster, turned pale as he stared at his screens. "Captain, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system," Foster reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Count as 47 ships, all showing military signatures." Jake's blood turned to ice as he processed the numbers. 47 warships was more firepower than most sector fleets possessed. He moved quickly to the communications console and opened channels to the approaching fleet, while simultaneously sending emergency signals to Earth and the nearest human defense installations. "Unknown fleet. This is Captain Morrison of the New Haven Defense Station. You are entering sovereign human space without authorization. Please state your intentions and prepare to be escorted to a safe distance from our colony." The response came in the form of a holographic transmission that filled the bridge with alien faces. Admiral Kretak of the Zephyrian Hive stood at the center, his insect features and compound eyes reflecting the cold calculation of a predator. Beside him were representatives from 11 other alien species, all members of the Galactic Council. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kretak's voice buzzed with mechanical precision through the universal translators. "By order of the Galactic Council, the human colony known as New Haven is declared in violation of galactic expansion protocols. You have 6 hours to evacuate all personnel from the planet and surrounding space. Any human presence remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Jake felt his heart hammering in his chest as he looked at the massive alien fleet on his screens. Each ship was 3 times the size of his patrol vessels, and they carried enough firepower to reduce the entire colony to ash. "Admiral, there are 3,000 civilians down there, including 800 children. We need more time to organize a proper evacuation." "You have 6 hours," Kretak repeated coldly. "Use them wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at empty space. He immediately opened communications to the planet's surface and found Mayor Helen Cross already coordinating emergency procedures from the town hall. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of desperation as she tried to process the impossible situation. "Jake, how many people can we evacuate?" Helen asked, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Our transport ships can carry maybe 1,500 people if we pack them tight," Jake replied, running quick calculations in his head. "The civilian freighters in orbit might take another few hundred, but Helen, we're talking about half the colony at most." The terrible mathematics of survival settled over both of them like a shroud. 3,000 people and only enough transport capacity for half that number. The decision that followed was made without discussion because every parent in the colony would have made the same choice. "The children go first," Helen said firmly. "All of them, with essential medical staff and teachers to care for them. If we can make multiple trips, we bring more people. If not, at least the children survive." Within an hour, the colony transformed into organized chaos as families faced the hardest goodbye of their lives. Danny Peterson stood at the loading dock holding his little sister Amy's hand, both of them trying not to cry as their parents helped load supply crates onto the evacuation ships. Their mother Sarah knelt down and hugged them both tightly. "You need to be brave and take care of Amy," she whispered to Danny. "Teacher, Murphy will look after all of you until we can be together again." "Why? Can't you come with us now?" Amy asked, her bottom lip trembling as she clutched her stuffed bear. "Because someone needs to help the other children get ready to leave," their father explained gently. "We will be on the next ship, I promise." Katie Walsh sat quietly in the corner of the transport ship, watching other children say goodbye to their families. Her parents had died in a farming accident 2 years ago, and she lived with the Hendersons, who treated her like their own daughter. Mrs. Henderson had pressed Katie's favorite book into her hands and promised that everything would be okay, but Katie could see the fear in her eyes. Teacher Sam Murphy moved through the ships, checking on the children and trying to maintain some sense of calm. He had volunteered to accompany the first evacuation flight, knowing the children would need familiar faces during the terrifying journey ahead. His own heart was breaking as he watched families torn apart by an impossible situation. The first 3 evacuation ships launched just as the alien fleet moved closer to the planet. Captain Morrison watched from his bridge as the transports accelerated toward the hyperspace jump point, carrying 243 children and their caregivers to safety. The ships were old civilian vessels not designed for speed or combat, but they were the children's only hope. "Second wave launching now," reported Lieutenant Foster as more ships lifted off from the colony. These carried the remaining children and some of the adults, packed beyond safe capacity but moving as fast as their engines could manage. The alien fleet continued its approach, and Jake realized they were not going to honor the full 6-hour deadline. Admiral Kretak's ships began powering weapon systems as the second evacuation wave cleared the atmosphere. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake broadcast to his small patrol fleet. "Take defensive positions around the evacuation transports. Do whatever you can to buy them time to reach the jump point." Lieutenant Commander Carol Hughes responded from the lead patrol ship. "Copy that, Captain. All ships moving to intercept positions." Jake's 6 patrol vessels formed a protective screen around the fleeing transports, their small weapon systems charging up to face an overwhelming enemy force. Every person on those ships knew they were flying to their deaths, but they also knew that each minute they bought meant more children reaching safety. The alien fleet opened fire without warning, brilliant energy beams lancing across space to strike the first patrol ship. Lieutenant Commander Hughes's vessel exploded in a ball of superheated gas, taking 12 brave crew members with it. The remaining 5 ships continued their desperate fight, dodging between the massive alien vessels and trying to draw fire away from the evacuation transports. One by one, Jake's patrol ships died in brilliant explosions that lit up the darkness of space. Captain Morrison watched his friends and colleagues sacrifice themselves as he maneuvered his defense station to provide covering fire. The old orbital platform was never designed for combat, but its crew fought with the desperate courage of people defending their families. The evacuation transports were nearly to the jump point when disaster struck. 3 alien heavy cruisers had positioned themselves to cut off the escape route, and their weapons reached out across space to touch the fleeing ships. The first transport simply vanished in a flash of energy that left no trace behind. The second ship broke apart slowly, its hull breached in multiple places as atmosphere and people spilled into the void. Teacher Sam Murphy felt the third transport shudder as alien fire raked across its hull. Emergency lights flickered and children screamed as the ship began to lose power and life support. He gathered the children around him in the center of the cargo bay, holding Katie Walsh and the Peterson children close as the ship began its final death spiral. 243 children died in the cold vacuum of space, their final transmissions filled with calls for their parents and pleas for help that would never come. The quantum communication burst reached Earth 4 hours and 17 minutes after the last transport. Ship died above New Haven. President Amy Richardson was reviewing trade agreements in the Oval Office when her chief of staff burst through the door without announcement, his face white as paper and his hands shaking as he held the emergency transmission. Madam President, we have received a priority alpha distress signal from the New Haven colony, he said, his voice barely steady. The colony has been attacked by a joint Galactic Council fleet. There are massive casualties. Amy Richardson had served as president for 3 years and had dealt with natural disasters, economic crises, and diplomatic tensions. But nothing had prepared her for the words she read on the transmission pad. The clinical military language could not hide the horror of what had happened. 3,000 civilians attacked without provocation. 243 children murdered while trying to escape. She set the pad down with trembling hands and looked up at her chief of staff. Get me Admiral Hayes, General Stone, and the entire Joint Chiefs. Cancel everything on my schedule and lock down the building. No one talks to the media until we understand what we are dealing with. Within 20 minutes, the most powerful people in human military and intelligence were gathered in the situation room deep beneath the White House. The holographic display showed the last transmission from Captain Morrison's defense station before it was destroyed, including tactical data on the alien fleet and recordings of Admiral Kretak's ultimatum. Admiral Ben Hayes had commanded human military forces for over 2 decades and had fought in 3 different conflicts, but his weathered face showed shock as he reviewed the attack data. 47 ships from 12 different species. This was not some rogue admiral acting alone. The Galactic Council planned and authorized this attack. General Lucy Stone, head of human intelligence, pulled up classified files on each of the alien species involved in the attack. Her voice was cold and professional as she read the names. Vextar Empire, Zephyrian Hive, Andromedan Collective, and 9 others. Every major power in the Council participated except for the Centauri Federation and the Rigelian Republic. Dr. Carl Adams sat at the far end of the conference table, his face pale as he absorbed the implications of what had happened. As humanity's leading expert on alien psychology and behavior, he understood something the others were just beginning to grasp. They have no idea what they have done, he said quietly, causing everyone in the room to turn toward him. The alien species that authorized this attack do not understand human psychology. They think killing our children will make us afraid and force us to accept limits on our expansion. President Richardson leaned forward in her chair. Explain that, Doctor. Dr. Adams stood and moved to the holographic display, calling up psychological profiles of the 12 alien species. Look at their reproduction patterns. The Vextar lay thousands of eggs and expect most to die. The Zephyrians produce offspring in massive swarms with high mortality rates. The Andromedans reproduce by crystal budding with no emotional attachment to individual young. He paused and looked around the room at the human faces staring back at him. None of these species form the deep emotional bonds with their children that humans do. They cannot comprehend that killing our young is not just an attack on our population, but an assault on the very core of what makes us human. The silence in the room was deafening as the implications sank in. Admiral Hayes was the first to speak, his voice rough with emotion. They killed our children thinking it would make us weak. Instead, they have done the one thing guaranteed to unite every human faction under a single purpose, Dr. Adams confirmed. Every parent, every grandparent, every person who has ever cared for a child will demand vengeance. This is not a political crisis that will divide us. This is an existential threat that will bring out humanity's most dangerous characteristics. General Stone was already accessing communication networks and military databases across human space. The reports flooding in confirmed Dr. Adams' analysis. On Mars, the colonial parliament had voted unanimously to place all military forces under Earth command. The independent mining colonies of the asteroid belt were volunteering their industrial capacity for military production. Even the normally peaceful agricultural worlds were demanding action. President Richardson watched the data streaming across the displays and realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in human history. How long before we can mobilize a response force? Admiral Hayes called up fleet disposition reports from across human space. The Second Fleet under Admiral Kate Roberts can be ready for combat operations within 2 weeks. The Fourth Fleet needs another month for repairs and resupply. But, Madam President, we are talking about attacking the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy. Their combined fleets outnumber us 3-1. Numbers will not matter, Dr. Adams interjected. The aliens chose to attack our children because they believed it would be an easy way to demonstrate their superiority. They have no understanding of human military doctrine or our capacity for total war. General Stone looked up from her intelligence reports with a grim smile. Every reserve unit in human space is reporting for active duty without being called. Veteran organizations are demanding to be reactivated. Civilian shipping companies are volunteering their vessels for military conversion. The aliens wanted to send us a message about our place in the galaxy. What message are we going to send back? President Richardson asked. Admiral Hayes stood and moved to the tactical display, his expression hardening into something that would have terrified the alien commanders who had authorized the New Haven attack. We are going to show them what happens when you murder human children. We are going to teach them that humanity does not accept limits imposed by others, and we are going to make sure they never forget the lesson. On colony worlds throughout human space, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Admiral Tony Clark began recalling all Fourth Fleet vessels to staging areas. Colonel Ryan Shaw started mobilizing Marine Expeditionary Forces for boarding. Actions. Dr. Susan Parker received authorization to weaponize experimental technologies that had been deemed too dangerous for conventional warfare. The message that went out on every human, military, and civilian communication channel was simple and direct. The Galactic Council has attacked and murdered human children at the New Haven colony. This act of aggression will not go unpunished. All human military forces are hereby placed on full combat alert. All civilian vessels are advised to clear designated staging areas immediately. But the official military response was only part of what began that day. In veterans' halls across human space, old soldiers who had thought their fighting days were over began cleaning weapons and checking equipment. In university engineering departments, professors started calculating optimal targeting solutions for alien ship designs. In elementary schools, teachers who had never held anything more dangerous than a stylus began learning to operate emergency shelters. The aliens had attacked New Haven, expecting to face a diplomatic protest and perhaps some economic sanctions. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human psyche since the species first learned to make tools and protect their young. Every human in the galaxy now knew that the Galactic Council considered their children acceptable targets. Every human parent looked at their own children and imagined them calling for help in the cold vacuum of space. Every human military officer remembered their oath to protect innocent life and felt that oath burning in their chest like a flame. The New Haven massacre had been intended to teach humanity about limitations and proper behavior in galactic society. Instead, it became the catalyst for the largest military mobilization in human history and the beginning of a conflict that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The aliens had sent their message clearly. Now humanity would send theirs back, written in fire across the star systems of every species that had voted to murder their children. 6 months after the New Haven massacre, the industrial heart of human space had transformed into the largest war machine the galaxy had ever seen. Factory worlds that once produced civilian goods now churned out warships, weapons, and military equipment around the clock. The orbital shipyards above Earth worked with such intensity that their forges could be seen glowing from the planet's surface at night. Admiral Ben Hayes stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive battleship UES Vengeance, watching the greatest armada in human history take shape in the staging area near Jupiter. 3,000 warships filled the space between the gas giants' moons, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and bristling with weapons that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. "Fleet status report," Hayes ordered, his weathered face showing the strain of 6 months spent preparing for the largest military operation in human history. Captain Lisa Parker, his chief of staff, consulted her datapad and rattled off numbers that would have seemed impossible before New Haven. Second Fleet reports full combat readiness with 750 ships under Admiral Roberts. Fourth Fleet has 800 vessels ready under Admiral Clark. Sixth Fleet brings 400 ships with the new experimental weapons under Admiral Torres. The remaining 1,000 ships are distributed among reserve squadrons and support elements. Hayes nodded grimly as he processed the staggering numbers. Every human world had contributed ships, crew, and resources to the growing fleet. Colonial militias had donated their patrol vessels. Mining companies had converted cargo haulers into troop transports. Even civilian pleasure craft had been modified with armor and weapons to serve as scout ships. On the research stations orbiting Mars, Dr. Susan Parker led teams of scientists working around the clock to weaponize technologies that had previously been considered too dangerous or unethical for military use. The kinetic bombardment systems could drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of nuclear weapons but without the radiation. Viral warfare protocols specifically designed to target alien biology were ready for deployment. Most terrifying of all were the antimatter devices that could crack the crust of a planet. The Council species believe we will respond with conventional military tactics, Dr. Parker explained to the assembled weapons development team. They expect fleet engagements, orbital bombardments, and occupation forces. They have no concept of humanity's willingness to employ total warfare when our children have been murdered. Colonel Ryan Shaw trained his Marine assault teams in the converted cargo bays of transport ships, preparing for the boarding actions that would capture alien vessels and installations. The Marines had volunteers from every human world, men and women who had left behind peaceful lives to learn the art of ship-to-ship combat. Many were parents themselves who looked at the holographic images of New Haven's children and saw their own sons and daughters. Remember, our objective is not just military victory, Shaw addressed his officers during a briefing session. We want the aliens to understand exactly why this happened to them. Every captured enemy commander needs to know that their suffering is payment for the children they murdered. Intelligence. Reports from General Lucy Stone revealed that the Galactic Council remained completely unaware of the storm gathering in human space. The alien species had noticed the increase in military activity, but interpreted it as defensive preparations rather than offensive buildup. Their own intelligence networks had failed to grasp the scale and intensity of humanity's response. The Vextar Empire has reinforced their border systems with an additional 50 warships, General Stone reported during a Joint Chiefs meeting. The Zephyrian Hive has recalled their exploration fleets to defensive positions. They clearly expect some form of human retaliation, but their preparations suggest they anticipate a limited engagement. Admiral Hayes smiled coldly as he reviewed the alien defensive dispositions. They are preparing for the war they think we should fight, not the war we are actually going to bring to them. The human fleet represented more than just ships and weapons. It carried the focused rage of an entire species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. Veterans who had served in previous conflicts came out of retirement to join the crews. Young people who had never seen combat volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. Entire families sometimes enlisted together, united by their desire to avenge New Haven's children. Admiral Kate Roberts commanded the Second Fleet from her flagship UES Retribution, a massive dreadnought whose weapons could level cities from orbital range. Her fleet consisted of battle-hardened vessels and crews that had fought pirates and raiders throughout the outer colonies. They knew how to wage war in the cold vacuum of space, and how to show no mercy to enemies who deserved none. My ships are ready for immediate deployment, Roberts reported during a fleet commander's conference. We have enough firepower to reduce any alien homeworld to molten slag, and enough Marines to storm every fortification in their space. Admiral Tony Clark's Fourth Fleet specialized in rapid assault and deep penetration missions. His ships were faster and more maneuverable than the heavy battleships of the Second Fleet, designed to strike hard and fast at strategic targets. Clark himself was a veteran of the pirate wars who had learned to fight outnumbered and win through superior tactics and overwhelming aggression. Admiral Nina Torres commanded the experimental Sixth Fleet, whose ships carried prototype weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics, antimatter torpedoes that could punch through any known shielding, energy weapons that could disrupt matter at the molecular level, stealth systems that made her ships invisible to alien sensors until the moment they opened fire. The preparation phase also revealed something the aliens had not anticipated about human psychology and culture. The attack on New Haven had not created fear or division among humanity. Instead, it had produced a level of unity and determination that transcended all political, cultural, and religious differences. Colonies that had been feuding over trade rights now worked together to build warships. Political parties that had been deadlocked over domestic policies now voted unanimously for military funding. Dr. Carl Adams studied the psychological profiles of human military personnel and found patterns that would have terrified any alien analyst. The crews of our warships are not fighting for territory or resources, he explained to President Richardson. They are fighting for the memory of specific children whose names they know and whose faces they have seen. This personal connection makes them far more dangerous than any professional military force. As the months passed and the human fleet grew stronger, reconnaissance reports brought disturbing news about the alien response. The Galactic Council had interpreted humanity's silence as acceptance of New Haven's destruction. Some alien leaders were already discussing which human colony to attack next, to reinforce their message about proper galactic behavior. Ambassador Zethrak of the Vextar Empire had been promoted for his successful planning of the New Haven operation. He now advocated for additional strikes against human agricultural worlds to force complete human withdrawal from disputed sectors. The alien leadership believed they had discovered an effective method for controlling human expansion without triggering costly, large-scale warfare. This fundamental misunderstanding of human nature would prove to be the aliens' greatest mistake. They had attacked New Haven expecting to face a species that would calculate cost versus benefit and choose submission over conflict. Instead, they had awakened something primal and terrible that had been sleeping in the human genome since their ancestors first learned to protect their young from predators. The human armada that gathered in the Jupiter system was not just a military force. It was the physical manifestation of parental love, twisted into an instrument of absolute vengeance. Every ship carried crews who looked at images of New Haven's dead children and felt a burning need to balance the scales of justice. The aliens had killed 243 human children, believing it would teach humanity about limitations. Soon they would learn that the only limit humanity recognized was the complete extinction of their enemies. The human armada struck at exactly 0600 hours Galactic Standard Time across 12 star systems simultaneously. Admiral Ben Hayes watched from his command bridge as 3,000 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect coordination, their appearance catching the alien defenders completely unprepared for the scale and fury of humanity's response. All fleets report successful insertion into target systems, Captain Lisa Parker announced as tactical displays lit up with contact markers across a dozen alien homeworlds. Enemy forces are scrambling to respond but appear to be in complete disarray. Hayes nodded grimly as he studied the tactical situation developing around Vextar Prime, the reptilian homeworld that had spawned the architect of New Haven's destruction. The planet's defensive fleet consisted of 48 heavy cruisers and supporting vessels, impressive by galactic standards but hopelessly outnumbered by the 700 ships of Admiral Roberts' Second Fleet. Signal Admiral Roberts to begin the attack, Hayes ordered. All ships are authorized to use maximum force against military targets. Civilian populations are to be spared, but all government and military installations are fair game. The Battle of Vextar Prime began with a devastating barrage from human heavy battleships that turned the alien defensive fleet into expanding clouds of superheated gas within the first 30 minutes. The Vextar ships were well armored and heavily armed, but they had been designed to fight conventional battles against opponents who followed established rules of engagement. The humans brought weapons and tactics that violated every assumption about civilized warfare. Admiral Roberts' flagship UES Retribution led the charge into orbit above the alien homeworld, its antimatter torpedoes punching through planetary shields that had been considered impregnable. Behind her came waves of assault ships carrying Colonel Shaw's Marines, who had trained for 6 months to storm alien installations and capture their occupants alive. Landing zones secured, Colonel Shaw reported as his Marines established beachheads around the Vextar capital city. Resistance is light and poorly coordinated. The aliens appear to have no experience with ground combat against human forces. Similar scenes played out across 11 other star systems as human fleets systematically dismantled the military infrastructure of every alien species that had participated in the New Haven attack. The Zephyrian hive worlds fell to Admiral Clark's rapid assault forces. The Andromedan Collective's crystal cities were reduced to rubble by Admiral Torres's experimental weapons. Each victory was methodical, overwhelming, and absolutely merciless. The speed and coordination of the human assault left the alien defenders with no time to mount effective resistance or call for reinforcements. Communications networks were jammed, hyperspace jump points were blockaded, and any ship that attempted to flee was hunted down and destroyed by human pursuit squadrons. Ambassador Zethrak cowered in his underground bunker beneath the Vextar capital as human marines systematically fought their way through the city above. The reptilian diplomat who had planned the New Haven massacre now faced the consequences of his actions as explosions shook the ground and human voices echoed through the communication systems. Surface defenses have been neutralized, came the report from his military commanders. Human ground forces are advancing on all government buildings. They appear to be taking prisoners, rather than simply destroying everything. The irony was not lost on Zethrak, that the humans were showing more mercy to adult alien soldiers than the Galactic Council had shown to human children. When the bunker doors finally exploded inward, and human marines stormed through the breach, he found himself face to face with Colonel Shaw himself. Ambassador Zethrak, Shaw said calmly, his weapon trained on the cowering alien. You are under arrest for crimes against humanity, specifically the murder of 243 human children at the New Haven colony. Within 18 hours, every major military installation in 12-star systems had been captured or destroyed. The alien fleets that had seemed so powerful when attacking a defenseless agricultural colony were revealed to be paper tigers when faced with humanity's full military might. The Galactic Council's combined forces had been annihilated with minimal human casualties. The real message began when Admiral Hayes established communication links to broadcast centers across the galaxy. Every alien species would witness what happened when humans decided to teach a lesson about proper behavior. The transmission showed Ambassador Zethrak standing before a human military tribunal, his reptilian features twisted with fear and defeat. Let it be known to every species in the galaxy, Zethrak read from a prepared statement, his voice shaking with terror, that the first rule of dealing with humans is simple: never harm their children. The Galactic Council forgot this rule when we attacked the New Haven colony. We killed innocent human young ones thinking it would demonstrate our strength and force humanity to accept limits on their expansion. The alien ambassador paused, his forked tongue flicking nervously as he continued reading the words that would reshape galactic politics forever. Instead, we unleashed something we could never have imagined. Humanity does not respond to threats against their children with fear or submission. They respond with total war and absolute vengeance. Behind Zethrak, holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of his homeworld's military forces and the capture of government officials who had authorized the New Haven attack. Similar scenes from 11 other alien homeworlds drove home the message that humanity's response had been overwhelming and complete. We believed that killing human children would make them weak and compliant, Zethrak continued, his voice breaking as he spoke. We were wrong. Attacking their young ones united every human faction under a single purpose and brought out their most dangerous characteristics. They crossed the galaxy to punish us, and they succeeded beyond our worst nightmares. Admiral Hayes stepped into view of the cameras, his weathered face showing no emotion as he delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy. New Haven's children have been avenged. The alien fleets that murdered them no longer exist. The governments that authorized their deaths have fallen. Let this serve as a reminder to all who would threaten humanity. He paused and looked directly into the camera, his words carrying the weight of 3,000 warships and the focused rage of an entire species. We are a people who will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to protect our children. Remember this truth, and there will be peace between us. Forget it, and face the consequences that await all who harm what we hold most dear. The broadcast concluded with images of human marines raising their flag over the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers. The organization that had ruled galactic politics for centuries had been dismantled in less than 24 hours by a species they had dismissed as newcomers who needed to be taught their proper place. In the aftermath of the human assault, surviving alien civilizations scrambled to distance themselves from the New Haven attack. The few species that had opposed the massacre found themselves elevated to new positions of influence, while those who had participated faced complete military occupation and political restructuring under human oversight. Dr. Carl Adams' predictions proved accurate. As news of humanity's response spread throughout the galaxy, the attack on New Haven had been intended to limit human expansion, but instead it demonstrated humanity's capacity for coordinated violence and strategic thinking. Alien species that had been considering their own aggressive actions against human colonies quietly abandoned those plans. The first rule of galactic diplomacy was established within months of the human victory: never attack human children. It became the most inviolable law in known space, taught in every alien military academy, diplomatic school, and space navigation course. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weakness was also their most terrifying strength. Monument builders across the former territories of the 12 defeated alien empires erected simple stone markers with identical inscriptions. Here lies a civilization that forgot humans will forgive almost anything, but never the murder of their children. These monuments served as permanent reminders of the price paid for underestimating humanity's protective instincts. The New Haven massacre had been intended as a lesson about limits and proper galactic behavior. Instead, it became the foundation for a new galactic order, where humanity's children were considered sacred and untouchable by every species among the stars.